Alright, I don't think this is a comparison you're going to see too much of on the internet. A 1964, that is an original 1964 Fender Vibroverb versus a brand new Fender Tone Master Super Reverb. So just a little bit of background on both amps. The Fender Vibroverb from 1964 was basically from the first year of blackface Fender amps. So there had been a brownface 1963 transitioning to 64 that became blackface. Now it was the first Fender amp really to have built-in reverb, and it has a 15-inch speaker, not a 12-inch speaker or two 10s. So it's relatively unique in the way it sounds. Now later this would become a favourite of Stevie Ray Vaughan, and seeing as they only made 500 or 600 of these, they're pretty rare and you know, reasonably expensive. Now sadly I have sold this amp to a guy who has been really wanting it. In fact, he wanted to buy it when I bought it and I just beat him to it. And I've had it for 7 or 8 months, and I decided that I wanted to offer it up to him for no other reason than he really is into Strats and you know, amps like this, and I was happy to sell it. Now, in this last week before I give it over to him, I'm quite sad about it, because I could say this is the best amp I've ever played. I mean, it's really, you know, for different reasons, it's right up there with the Rift Ainsley Lister amp and the 2 Rock Bloomfield Drive as just being mind-blowingly good. Now, I'm comparing it to this Tone Master Super Reverb. So a Super Reverb has 4 10-inch speakers. It's a 45 watt amp, as opposed to the Vibroverb is around 35 watts. And being a Tone Master, that means it's a digital modelling amp, actually. So if you didn't know that, you might be surprised when you hear it. Fender decided to put a lot of effort into individual, so you can get a Tone Master Deluxe, Tone Master Twin, and a Super. You know, rather than giving out one box with all those sounds in it, they decided to build the amps as if they were the real valve amps, but make them digital. Now, it's a lot cheaper even than a valve Super Reverb, and it's a lot cheaper than this Vibroverb. Just for comparison's sake, it's about a quarter of the price. Now, if you can find a good Vibroverb, it's probably, when I say good one, this is a good one, but you get even better ones. The Super Reverb might be a 6th or 7th of the price. So anyway, the comparison here is more about two things. What does a Vibroverb and a Super Reverb have in common or sound different? And what does a digital amp as opposed to a valve amp feel like to play and sound like? So we're going to go through 3 different sets of clips. One's where I've set the amps as close as I can in terms of the way they react. So when one's breaking up, the other one's breaking up. And I've done the first test is with the bright switch on. The second test is with the vibrato on both really turned up. And the last test is with no vibrato and with no bright switch. So I think we should dive into the first one, and then I'm going to talk you through what it felt like and sounded like in the room. Now, in the room, there's a big difference between the two sounds. Being that one is a 15-inch single speaker and the other is 410s, there's a difference in the focus of the sound as it hits you, which makes the Vibroverb feel more direct and aggressive. The Super Reverb has more low end, no matter what you do in the room. Those 410s are just pushing the sound out differently. And let's go into this valve versus digital thing. What is the difference in the feeling? Well, the one thing to say is that this is a nearly 60-year-old speaker in the Vibroverb and is a brand new, they've been played for 5 or 6 hours in the Super Reverb. So it's not fair to say too much about that. The Super Reverb over time will loosen up and develop, more of a broken up speaker sound. In my experience, that's going to take me another 6 or 7 months in the way that I play my amps, which is I swap amps around a lot. So it might take you a month or two to at least start to develop some more looseness out of the amp. The Super Reverb in this digital format has a slightly more hollow sound, if that's the way I can put it. It doesn't spark and mojo as much as the Vibroverb, but then so much of that would be in my mind. What I can say is I'm definitely not interested in bashing this Tone Master. I'm actually intrigued by it and think it's a fantastic job that Fender have done. How could it compare to a legendary old amp? Well, it couldn't. I mean, even a Valve Super Reverb, a new one, might not be able to. But in terms of the playing, it just does feel less special. So, in terms of Tone Master overall, compared to a fantastic Valve amp that's had some history, where the history has got into your brain and it's never going to leave, and so you feel special when you're playing it, of course, it's probable that a digital amp is never quite going to get you to that place. So if that's important to you, building up a sort of connection, a vibe, a bond, and an interest in your own amp, it's less likely to happen with the Tone Master. In terms of the sounds of each one, the Vibroverb has less low end, it's a bit more sizzling on top, and it's more dynamic. As to whether that's to do with being valves versus digital or not is a different matter. The Super Reverb has its own specific sound, which you might prefer, but the digital amp doesn't quite behave in the way that I expect the Valve amp does. It's a bit too polite and clean. So that's to say that ultimately, if you've got 4 times the money or 5 times the money, you might be interested in finding an old Vibroverb because it will give you the ultimate in Fender blackface mojo. If you can afford the Valve version of the Super Reverb, the problem with that is it's going to be incredibly loud. I find this Tone Master is not that loud, and it's got a built-in attenuator. So, as I said, this is not a direct comparison between the two amps. It's more of an interesting sort of, mashup to see what I can tell you about them. Ultimately, the feeling of playing the Tone Master in the room is nowhere near as special as playing the Vibroverb. But as I've just said, there's lots of factors behind why that might be. Okay, I want to play around with the vibrato. So I've set it pretty intense. Let's see how the Super Reverb stacks up. I've got to say the Tone Master Super Reverb is just as good as a valve amp really when it comes to vibrato. It's clearly an effect which maybe is quite easy to replicate, and actually with the vibrato on the Super Reverb is more of an interesting amp. It's more lively and it's more fun to play. So in comparison, the two of them are both fantastic if you love that big vibrato sound. It really, the amp becomes slightly the amp changes character slightly on both of them with the vibrato in terms of playing. There's that really beautiful edge of breakup double stop thing that gets even better with the vibrato on. And in terms of filling the room up with warmth and that sort of pulsing sound, fantastic. If I was actually going to do a lot of live gigs, the Super Reverb, the Tone Master would be one of the top amps for me to take, and with the vibrato on, I think it would really fill up a stage, and with that attenuator you can then dial it in, and that's one of the main reasons why these Tone Masters are so brilliant. They're really, I think, there for the professional in mind, as well as anyone else who wants to enjoy that. So what else can I say about that? The Super Reverb, the Tone Master does a great job, and ultimately as an audience wouldn't be thinking between the two, oh that one's so much better or that one. But the way the reverb reacts is quite different, and I'll talk about that now. I can't put the reverb on the Super Reverb very high up, because it's almost like they've dialed in the wrong sort of reverb. Once you get beyond about 2 or 3, it almost turns into that sort of hall or plate, I don't know which one to describe it as reverb. It's too big, it sounds silly, it doesn't sound real. It doesn't bounce back at you like a proper spring reverb. The Vibroverb, on the other hand, it does, but like I found with these older amps, it's a bit wallowy as well. Maybe the springs need tightening up, new springs perhaps. I think I'll have to work on picking up that reverb in the room somehow. Maybe it didn't. I'm not sure you heard exactly what I heard there, but when you first start playing when the reverb's a bit higher like this, when you first start playing it starts off pretty well. It's when the tail doesn't stop and it muddles into your playing as you go forward. That doesn't feel realistic. So that's just what I was trying to capture there. But ultimately the Vibroverb is going to give you that spring back and that attack and that difference in the attack and the help with that breakup sound that you want, that just really emotional sounding sort of, attack that when you hit it and the reverb springs back on you. The Super Reverb is not that great for that, I've got to be honest. Okay, the final segment is going to be without the bright switches. Some people like bright switches and some people don't. I think No, let's hear it first. I'll talk afterwards. So I think the Super Reverb is actually improved by taking off the bright switch. And I wanted to say this at the beginning, but I forgot after the first demo, is the bright switch on the Super Reverb doesn't feel very realistic for some reason. When you turn it off and on, you'll feel an almost artificial change in the sound. So with it off, I think the amp actually sounds better. It's more balanced and it sounds more like a real valve amp. I don't know why I played two different things for those demos. I got lost in the moment and I played what felt good on both amps. So if that tells you anything, then maybe it does. There's a lot of soul and attachment connected with that old Fender Vibroverb that sometimes you play something one way, compared to another amp. It's a different feeling. And I think that's maybe something people don't talk about enough in these sort of videos and talking about amps and things. It's very easy as a musician to get attached to your equipment and to create a personality for it in your mind, and for that to skew these, I'm trying to be reasonably objective here. The Super Reverb, the Tone Master, is incredibly impressive. Mustn't forget to keep saying that, because I don't want anyone to feel like they're getting the short straw when they pick a Tone Master. I mean, ultimately, it's not a cheap, it's a pretty expensive amp. It's a few £100 more than a Hot Rod Deluxe, which is, of course, one of the most popular gigging amps. And it would stack up against something like that really well. It has a proper Super Reverb character, and that in itself is impressive. Doing this sort of granular comparison with what is one of the best Fender amps ever made, and a good example of it, and is not fair. So ultimately what I'm saying is, yeah, you compare this Tone Master to one of the best ever Fender amps, and next to it, it might sound slightly less interesting, and it certainly doesn't feel as inspirational to play, but it does a great job, the Super Reverb. So I'm leading towards a proper full review of the Super Reverb in a couple of months' time. I'm still using it as my practice amp, and I'm doing comparisons like this, and ultimately I want to show you everything about the amp in one go as well, if you're interested. This Vibroverb's heading out the door on Saturday. It's Tuesday now, so I'm most likely to spend the next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday about 3 or 4 hours each day just playing it. I might make another video if I can think of an interesting idea. But I hope you found this interesting. Let me know down in the comments what you think. How did the Tone Master stack up against this beautiful vintage amp? And yeah, see you next time. Cheers.